Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Gerard Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2012 psychological thriller movie titled House at the End of the Street. Now, House at the End of the Street runs for 1 hour and 41 minutes long. It is directed by Mark Tonderai. The script was written by David Luca. The story was Jonathan Mostow, who was supposed to direct the movie back in 2003, but since it kind of went into like production hell, no production company wanted to direct this movie or wanted to get involved into the movie project. So it took roughly 7 years for it to get finally greenlit. And actually, looking at this movie, I guess there was a reason why this movie wasn't greenlit, or why it shouldn't have. But we will get more into that in a bit. It is produced by Aaron Ryder, no relation, at least not that I know of. Maybe, I don't know, somewhere down the line, I don't know. Joining the production crew includes Peter Block and Hal Lieberman. It is composed by Theo Green, the cinematography by Miroslav Bazek, and it was edited by Steve Merkovich and Karen Porter. And the stars of the movie are Jennifer Lawrence, Elisabeth Shue, Max Theriot, Jill Bellows, Eva Link, Grace Tucker-Duguay, Nolan Gerard Funk, Allie MacDonald, Jordan Hayes, Krista Bridges, and John Healy. So, horror thriller movies like House at the End of the Street seems to kick things off in the typical cliche fashion by having someone sell a house at a ridiculously affordable price, which gives us a little indication of events that are yet to come as the film continues on. It never fails. Why do these people seem to be so fucking naive that they are just going to go out and buy a house at an affordable price without going into like further explanation? They're like, oh wow, hey look, a nice, elaborate, immaculate home, and they're selling it to me for cheap. I mean, aren't they at least a little bit suspicious of what things are about to transpire? It happens in thriller movies, it happens in horror movies. Why? I don't know. Why do most characters in these type of movies are usually very stupid? I'm not saying maybe the characters are stupid, but sometimes the decisions that they do are often very questioning. Of course, underneath all this reasonably priced abode is usually the centerpiece of what grave dangers are lurking ahead, whether supernatural or the scene of a grisly crime. It's in store for who's ever gullible enough to buy this property. In this case, this movie um, is set in a suburban area, and the house at the end of the street was the scene of a grisly murder. It just seems that the people who end up purchasing this estate are either authors looking for something that will make them famous, or a person or family who are leaving all that's remained from their troubled past in hoping as a way to escape, to redeem themselves, and to get their shit back as much as possible. To get their shit together, so to speak. It's been done before in this movie, and we get exactly what makes everything so well planned and unoriginal. This movie is truly, definitely by the numbers. And they definitely play the numbers game, and they do all the essential checkpoints to make sure everything that you have seen in a horror movie or a thriller movie get their checkpoints done. Okay, so once we get into the settling down and adjusting to your surroundings, the other smaller fragments are also in store, And of course, you have all the cliched characters that come into the effects of the narrative, including cops who are more useless than tits on a bull, lighting that malfunctions because hey, all the most exciting climatic scenes always seem to somewhat either take place in the dark, and the lighting is usually often badly adjusted, and creepy neighbors that make you wish you returned from where you once lived. In this case, once again, we have a bunch of neighbors who would love nothing more than that aforementioned house at the end of the street to burn. Why? Because it was the scene of a murder incident, and now people just don't want to live in the neighborhood, and unless they sell the houses for cheap. So if you burn this house down, hey, at least then the prices will go up, and more of elitist families will get to live back in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood will feel more like a rich area instead of, just a bunch of ragtag people just coming in and taking advantage of cheap, affordable housing. You may have the choice to walk out if these things get on your nerves. A lot of people had said that a lot of people did that. Or they could sit through its entirety to see what things this movie might have, which might be of some potential point of interest. I mean, maybe there might be something that might hold your interest and you may probably just want to sit through. But to me personally, it's just basically by the numbers, and dotting the lines together and just making everything just all seem, you know, cliched and something unoriginal. In the end, you'll likely end up disappointed as each long winded scene will end up featuring characters who show up to the point where you simply don't really care for in the end. I mean, here's the thing about this movie: most of the characters in this movie are mostly, passive aggressive, unlikable individuals. Whether you're playing a big role or a small role. Hell, even the leading protagonist in this movie does not come off as a cookie cutter good character either. I mean, she also seems to have much great levels of unlikability as well. Oh, and for viewing pleasures, they don't throw in some overly done and unnecessary jump scares that don't really make your heart beat any faster, but simply just to annoy the fuck out of you until you reach the brink of insanity. Yeah, and this movie is not a horror movie, and yet you still have like the suspense music background and smoke and mirrors and all that bullshit. But it's not a horror movie. It's more like a psychological thriller. Big difference. There's no ghouls and ghosts, but there is a lot of uncertainty that bestows around the neighborhood where our leading protagonists have decided to take residency. There are some movies that were left on the cutting room floor, and for good reason too. House on the end of the at the end of the street is a perfect example of why not all scripts that are sent to Hollywood are not red lit. In this case, this is a movie that should have just remained on the cutting room floor and would have saved a lot of heartbreak. Because this movie was complete and utter shit. And no wonder why a lot of movie productions turned this one down. Going back to 2003, the script was originally given to Jonathan Mostow to direct. He gets credit for writing the story, but he was going to direct this movie. I bet you he probably had different actors and actresses in mind, and that's perfectly understandable. The times have changed. But then it was passed over to Mark Tonderai to direct and David Loca to rewrite the script and doctor it up to fit their own personal agendas. So this movie went through like 7 to 10 years of production hell before it was finally greenlit in 2012. The real saving grace from making this movie into a complete abomination is from the performance of Jennifer Lawrence. Not to say that she was good in this movie, she really wasn't. But I think the reason they shoehorned her into this movie is simply because they needed some kind of star power. And Jennifer Lawrence at the time was on a surge in her movie career or even in the entertainment industry. She has carved a name for herself in Hollywood from her years in the X-Men franchise and to her very prominent role in The Hunger Games and her Oscar-winning performance in Silver Linings Playbook. They really just needed that big star to shoehorn into the film just to get some recognition, I guess. Because this movie would have been just reduced to a simple fucking B movie that nobody would really give a shit about. And even though this movie is not a B movie, I still didn't really give too much of a shit about it either. Like I said, they didn't cast her due to her talents to be recognized. They brought her in for her looks. And she actually looks quite attractive in tank tops and to show off some cleavage. I'm not trying to be sexist, but that was the reason why they really wanted her in. They just wanted a pretty face. I mean, sure, they could have went with a fat, frumpy individual, but people would not be interested. In order for you to be kind of like a final girl in a movie, you kind of have to have some form of good looks. And Jennifer Lawrence, as beautiful as she is, that was her real reason she was in this movie. She didn't really have to do much. But then again, a lot of the actors and actresses in this movie did not really have to do much. But just to be, complete assholes. And to make life for our leading antagonist, which I will get to in a bit. So Elisabeth Shue, who I believe was in her mid to late 40s when this movie was in, but hey, she still looked very hot for her age. Still does too. Elisabeth Shue is actually a very beautiful person for someone who's nearly pushing 60 as we speak. While she and Jennifer Lawrence play the roles of mother and daughter, Sarah and Elisa, who depart from their troubled lives after a nasty divorce from Sarah and Elisa's estranged father. So they settle down in a new home located in the middle of the woods in a not so inviting town. I mean, they're just such a bunch of passive aggressive assholes in this town. And they just seem so unnatural in the way they dictate themselves, in the way they in the way they speak, sounds so unnatural. Like, oh, that house, we want to burn it down, just so that the mortgage in the other areas of the housings can go up a bit, because this house is bringing us down. So if they just burn the house down, it won't mean very much to us. And if somebody's in there, well, like I really give a flying fuck. Yeah, that's the way they speak. And they say it in such a casual way, like, nah, you burn the house down, no big fucking deal. That's just the way they speak. The townspeople are not very happy with the fact that Sarah and Elisa have decided to live into one of these more cheaper houses. Because next door to them a horrific murder took place in which they believe the story was that a young girl killed both her parents and ran into the woods only to never be found. So we're led to believe that there's nobody in the house is abandoned, and years before Sarah and Elisa moved into the house, like right next to the murder house, there was a murder. And it was from a young girl who murdered both her parents. But then Elisa notices a light turn on in what was assumed to be an abandoned home. So it appears that there is somebody still living in that house. Only to realize that, yes, there is an occupant living there. A young man named Ryan, played by Theriot, who is assumed to be the lone survivor of his family. He tells Elisa that the reason why he never really shows himself in public, well, obviously for obvious reasons, not only is he living in the scene of the murder house, most of the people in the neighborhood don't even really want him around. He is a loner, an introvert, an outcast, and people just seem to quickly judge this poor guy. Elisa starts to become attracted to Ryan, much to the chagrin of her mother and the townsfolk who have no problem tormenting Ryan in any way possible. I mean, he is just completely hated by everybody in this town. And during most of the movie, we kind of wonder why. Okay, so he's a bit of a loner and an introvert and seems to be somewhat solitary as an oyster and self contained. But he also seems to come across as being, you know, friendly, inviting, and very soft spoken. But it seems like everybody just judges him. Hell, even Sarah, who at first, in the first 5 minutes, she invites him over to their house to have dinner, and then before he leaves, Sarah then just coldly tells him to never see her daughter again, and she comes up with some bullshit excuse because of the fact that he's a college student and she's a high school student, and things like that. And then you also come to a point where even Elisa herself has often told off her mother that she's a that she's a slut, and that the only reason why their divorce is because of her history of alcoholism and her philandering, which was the real reason why Sarah and her and Elisa's father divorced. And she's really actually just says it such a casual way, like, this isn't the way how normal people speak. And you're saying it almost like as if it's some kind of badge of honor thing. It just feels so unnatural. Why would you exploit that to a total stranger? What goes on behind the home is like really practically none of anybody's business. And why is she going out telling it to him? But then again, also, Ryan is not always telling the truth about his confessions. All right, so he explains that the girl who killed her parents is was his sister, Carrie Ann, And the reason why Carrie Ann killed his parents was because of an incident that happened a long time ago. Uh, Ryan and his sister Carrie Ann were playing outside on the swings while his mother and father were a couple of dopers who would rather prefer to get high than to watch over their children. Well, apparently, he tells Elisa that she fell off the swing and hit her head on impact and has suffered from perpetual brain damage. So apparently, one night she went ape shit and she killed both their parents. But the thing is that Ryan is not fully, completely telling the truth. He's not telling a full-blooded fib, but as I continue, we realize that his story is not all 100% accurate. But somehow, even though Sarah told her not to hang out with Ryan, Elisa still finds Ryan attractive. Because hey, all typical pretty girls love a bad boy, do they? They do. As time goes on, we wonder if Ryan is just an unfortunate, innocent young man who's traumatized by the tragic events in his life, or does he himself have some dark hidden secrets of his own? Well, apparently, I think we'll have to stick with the dark secrets of his own. You see, apparently downstairs in his basement, there's like a secret doorway, and inside that doorway, we hear a girl screaming. At first, we're expected to believe that it was Carrie Ann. So, so she was found. Well, apparently, he said that the reason why he wasn't around during the time of their parents' murder was because he was staying at an aunt's house. I think that's what he was mentioning about. Anyhow, and that Ryan has been under the care and supervision of his allegedly mentally unstable sister, feeding her chicken noodle soup and locking her in a basement. One night she actually escapes and tries to go after a bystander, but Ryan just stops her at her tracks. And then, from out of nowhere, he snaps her neck and kills her. So then we're starting to become to wonder maybe there is a reason why people don't want Ryan around. But then, even though Ryan is clearly the villain in this story, there is a lot of great level of sympathy I have for this guy. I mean, people still continue to torment him, including some preppy douchebag fuck who goes by the name of Tyler, who one time he and his other gang of goons tried to beat the shit out of Ryan, but Ryan eventually can fight back. Wow, I guess his years of depression and rage is fueled by a certain level of toughness. I mean, he even took Tyler's ankle and twisted it like a pretzel, or snapped it like a twig. And then Tyler's mother, who's like a real fucking shallow bitch that says something like to the cops like, I want him arrested. But the cop is like, well, your son's been harassing and tormenting him. So I really can't arrest him because if anything, maybe your son should be the one who should be incarcerated and not Ryan. By the way, Officer Weaver is, of course, played by Jill Bellows, who you may have remembered if you watched The Shawshank Redemption. He was Tommy Williams. You know, kind of like a greaser guy who eventually gets shot by Sergeant Hadley. Anyways, let's not go into a Shawshank, but that's who Jill Bellows is. Apparently, Officer Weaver's like Ryan's only friend in town, but you know, he says to Tyler's mother, like, well, your son is practically been harassing Ryan for a long time. Therefore, I'm not going to press any charges or do anything because your son has been bothering him, and I can't be accountable for his actions. If anything, maybe he should be the one going to jail for harassment. You know. But then also we gotta realize that the Carrie Ann person who Ryan snapped the neck to turns out to be not the real Carrie Ann. In fact, if you want to know what happened to the real Carrie Ann, well, part of his story was true. They were playing outside. His parents were more busy getting high on dope. Ryan got a little careless. Carrie Ann fell off the swing, hit her head on impact. But instead of going complete ape shit, she just fucking died. She died on impact from the swing. That's what really happened. So then you're asking me, who was this Carrie Ann that got her neck snapped? Well, apparently, after his parents' death, he's been looking around for other Carrie Anns. In other words, that Carrie Ann who we saw in the scene getting her neck snapped by Ryan was not a real Carrie Ann. She was just a decoy. And apparently, we saw the whole eat, sleep, conquer, repeat stage going again. He one time checked himself into a restaurant where he meets a friendly waitress who goes by the name of Peggy Jones. But apparently, it turns out that Peggy Jones ended up becoming his next Carrie Ann. And apparently, she also ends up meeting her fate. When Alyssa started to know a little too much about Ryan and realized that this guy really is the villain in this story, she almost came close to being the next Carrie Ann. He had her hog-tied to a chair. Somehow she managed to escape. Officer Weaver goes in to check to investigate, only to have Ryan stab him in the in the chest. Elisa picks up a gun and shoots at him 3 times. And then Sarah arrives on the scene, takes a hammer, and bashes Ryan in the head. But the thing is I believe this Ryan must really be like a. He must have be like. He must have skin like an armadillo. I mean, it didn't even phase him. I mean, by then the guy should have been dead. And I think maybe they would have been more of a satisfying ending if they would have killed him. But no, he survives 3 shot wounds and a laceration to the brain from a hammer. And yet he survives, only to end up being institutionalized. And then through flashbacks, we see his parents celebrating Carrie Ann's birthday. But only the problem is Carrie Ann ends up saying, "But my name's not Carrie Ann. My name is Ryan." And his mother just aggressively bitch slaps him and says, "You from now on are Carrie Ann." So at the opening scenes, we begin to discover that this whole time it wasn't Carrie Ann who killed her parents. It was Ryan who was forced and punished to live out the rest of his life as Carrie Ann, growing out his hair, wearing girls' clothes as a punishment, because they would have rather preferred to have a daughter than to have a son. So that means Ryan had to live out the rest of his life as Carrie Ann, and the only way to get himself from no longer being Carrie Ann, he had no choice but to kill his parents. At first, when you see his parents, you think, "Holy shit! 2 people's lives have been lost," and you feel kind of bad at first. But then you come to realize these people deserve to die. I mean, punishing him for something that's conventionally not entirely his fault. Sure, he was irresponsible. Sure, he was careless. But they weren't any better either. They were irresponsible. They should have watched both of them to make sure both of them are safe. But instead, they rather wasted their fucking time on dope. So we're all led. So in the end, it was actually Ryan who, at the beginning, killed both his parents just so that he could get out of being Carrie Ann. But somehow the whole stick of looking for other Carrie Anns was passed over vicariously towards him. Their legacy would transpire to his psyche. So he's been probably looking. So there probably was more than just 2 Carrie Anns. There's probably been more than 2 Carrie Anns, because he's been doing this for a long time, I guess. Which is very convoluted. So most intelligent moviegoers can spot where this movie is headed from just a mile away. Even if it means having to go through the tiresome first act of Sarah and Elisa settling into their new home, trying to further acquaint themselves with their snobby neighbors, trying to fit in, with school and work, and just trying to blend in with the people who live around the area. It doesn't fully develop much due to the budget of the movie. I mean, really, the only time the movie starts to show some level of intrigue is when we're introduced to Ryan. But knowing what to do with his character and which direction to go makes things more complex than it should. Are we supposed to sympathize with Ryan or are we not? We don't really know. Me, I like to look through both ends. Yes, I feel bad that Ryan had to go through severe punishment from his parents due to his own irresponsibilities. And we do feel bad that most of the town don't even want him around. But then you also have to realize that Ryan is is a complete psychopath, and so there is some justifiable reasons why nobody here in town wants him around. So you're kind of put at a crossroads as to whether you should feel sorry for him or whether this bastard deserves what he gets. In some ways, I'm leaning a little towards both, and the scenes are only looked over briefly, which results in a convoluted ending that depended heavily on an epilogue to make any sense of what has happened before our very eyes. And even that came out unappealing and it looked contrived. So, surely, if you're a fan of Jennifer Lawrence, you might want to look into this movie. But the best scenes are truly when Ryan comes into the movie. If they could have tweaked the script a bit, he would have been someone who can be a combination of sympathetic with an equal level of genuine creepiness. But it's just so awkwardly displayed that if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give House at the End of the Streets, at the End of the Street from 2012, a 3 out of 10. So if you want to watch the movie, fine, but just don't expect a lot out of it. You're not going to get that much. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the three simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Corrupt Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.